To another edition of the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show, where this week we are super excited to start off a series of episodes that we're going to be releasing as the coaching carousel gets going in various states. We're super happy to have the AD at Mesa High School, tradition-rich Mesa Jackrabbits, Mr. David Klecka on the show. We're super excited to have him, and we're going to get into maybe some football interview questions. We're going to talk about some topics, maybe what coaches can do to separate themselves in that process, and a lot of different things that I'm excited to talk to Coach about. Also, he is a former McClintock Charger. My roots as a Charger are very strong. My uncle, still as a matter of fact, teaches there, was the head coach there. My father was in the program from the time he graduated in 1971 till the early 2000s, was a McClintock Hall of Famer there. Whole family went there. I was a fourth team all cul-de-sac, not a Hall of Famer by any stretch, but a lot there at McClintock, so I'll be looking forward to maybe chatting to him about that as well. But before we get into that, just want to take a moment to remind everybody that the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show is brought to you by School Funder. School Funder, the only online fundraising company in America that lets you keep all of the money your team raises. Sounds too good to be true. It's not. We've used School Funder twice. The only fee that we paid them was a 3% credit card processing fee that really goes with everything. Been able to raise a good amount of money with the weight lift-a-thon that we've done the last couple of years, and we kept all of that money. You would never, ever give away 20% of the wins your team earns, so why are you willingly giving away 20% of their proceeds in fundraising? Please get in contact with School Funder. All of them are super easy to work with, really, really good guys. Get in contact with them and let them know the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show sent you, because it will help the show. And while you're helping the show, we're trying to continue to grow our audience, so please, 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 on the YouTube channel, like and subscribe. More subscriptions we get, it's completely free, just the more coaches we are able to reach. And that is our goal. Number one goal of the show is to be a primary resource, or just another resource for coaches out there, and a free one for coaches to be able to get some information on a variety of topics. We've had so many coaches come on here, including the head football coach of the Mesa Jackrabbits, Jeremy Hathcock. There's been so many guys have been so generous with their information, and that's one of the neatest things about the coaching profession, I think, is how generous guys are with their knowledge. And I was excited to tap into this episode because Mr. Klecka is an outstanding AD, has done a great job with Mesa, and previously, I believe, Desert Vista and some other stops. But tell us a little bit about your journey from coaching to admin to teaching, all of it. You know, your sports career as a youngster. We'd like to hear about it. So tell us a little bit about your story.
You got it. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm excited. This is a great opportunity because I really think what we're going to talk about today is going to be very helpful. Very helpful. But, I was born in Tempe, Arizona, and I went to McClintock High School. Growing up in Tempe, McClintock was it. And, we used to go to the football games, the basketball games, whether you're in third grade or junior high, and then you went to your high school. You walked to school, or, it was, you were drinking the Kool-Aid for your high school back in the day like that. And I was proud and excited that I had McClintock High School, that's where I was going. Because I had a lot of buddies that didn't have that excitement about high school that I had. And mainly because I was a football player, and McClintock in the 80s was a beast. Went to McClintock my freshman year. Our football team went 8-0, and my freshman football coach was Dennis Johnson.
Played for Coach Johnson.
Yeah, exactly. Who ended up being a head coach at one point. But we were lucky to have qualified, competent football coaches at lower levels, which we'll get into later on. My senior year, once again, I was fortunate enough to be a part of a state championship football team. We went 13-2. We beat Westwood in the state title game in 1989 to win Coach Kiefer's third title. My 4 years at McClintock, Carl Kiefer was the head football coach. Harold Slemmer was the athletic director. And That's all I'd ever known was consistency. Dennis Johnson is my freshman coach. My JV coach was Larry Faust. And then Carl was my varsity coach. And now as an AD, I understand how important that consistency is, that what we did on our freshman team, we did as varsity. Maybe it was called something different and it was a higher level of play, but the foundation was set when I was 14 years old. McClintock in 1990, Jim Lyons was the principal, fantastic administrator. I knew my sophomore year in high school I wanted to be a teacher and I wanted to be a football coach. I ran track there for Ron Hauser, and I knew that football and track went hand in hand, so I even said I'll coach track too. So I am at ASU as a freshman. I was not lucky enough to play college football, but I knew I wanted to coach. Well, Coach Kiefer spent one more year at McClintock. That was my freshman year at ASU. And then my sophomore year at ASU, he announced he was going to Mountain Point High School to open that school with Harold Slemmer as a principal. I immediately went over to McClintock while Coach Kiefer was still there, and I said, hey, I want to coach football. I was 19 years old. I want to be a special ed teacher. Can you help me out at Mountain Point? Well, at 19 years old, 1991, he hired me to be a freshman football coach with a veteran staff. So in 1991, I coached freshman football at Mountain Point. The first year, the inaugural year of Mountain Point. Coach Kiefer was the head JV coach because we didn't have varsity then. Dick Banaszewski was the line coach. Phil Avedessa was the D coordinator. And those three were my high school coaches. Larry Faust was the freshman head coach at Mountain Point. So I coached with Coach Faust. And then they brought Curtis Cook over from Tempe High, who was a legend too. And so I cut my teeth at 19 coaching football with Coach Kiefer at Mountain Point. Once again, that's all I've ever known. It's all I've ever known. I was at Mountain Point for 10 years as a freshman football coach, varsity football coach, and then I became the head girls track coach. And I just really enjoyed the heck out of it. In 2001, I left education, got into sales. Before I had left, I had accepted a job at Tempe High as the activities assistant principal. This was in 2001. I accepted the job and then I didn't want it. That's not where I wanted to be. So I got into sales. And I was doing sales for about 15 years. Ran into George Delatorre, who at the time in 2016 was the head coach at Dobson High School. And they hadn't won a game in like 4 years or something crazy. So I asked George if I could volunteer and help out while being in sales during the day. So I coached the quarterbacks at Dobson in 2016. We went 5-5. And that was the first time I had ever coached or been involved in a football program that wasn't Carl Kiefer's. So I brought a lot of ideas to the table. I enjoyed my season. George retired afterwards. And so I thought my career was over coaching. I had fun. I was driving to work, and Preston Jones called me in the spring of 2017, said he needed a running back coach at Perry High School. I said, I'm in. So I was in sales during the day. I coached Perry football in 2017 with Brock Purdy as a quarterback. I coached the running backs. We hardly ever ran the ball, as you know. We either Brock threw it or he ran it. Had a fantastic year. Made it to the state title game. We lost to Chandler by 7. It was a fantastic game down in Tucson. And then I said, I want to get back into teaching full-time and coaching. I even said this to everybody that would listen to me. I want to teach special ed. I want to coach football. I want to coach track. I don't want to be in administration. I want to have fun. I don't have children. At the time, I wasn't married. So Dan Serrano, the principal at Perry, who is a good friend of mine, he did not have a special ed opening at Perry, so he couldn't hire me. So Desert Vista hired me to be a special ed teacher varsity assistant coach with Danny Hines, and then the head boys track coach at Desert Vista. Loved every second of it. My first year I did special ed, loved it. At the end of my first year at Desert Vista, Serrano called and said, I got a special ed opening. I did everything but accept the job in a heartbeat. Desert Vista said, hey, we'll make you the dean of students. I said, all right, okay. So it's close to my house. So I'm the dean of students. Tommy Eubanks is the athletic director. I'm coaching football. I'm coaching track. Everything's great. COVID hit. And so as a dean, I did a lot of the contact tracing and all that. I shut my track season down, which was tough because we had a good team. Then Tommy Eubanks gets the Mesa District Athletic Director job. So I become the Desert Vista Athletic Director. Going against totally what I wanted, but at least I took it as I can help coaches out, keep them organized, and teach them what I know. Then from there, I'm at Desert Vista 2 years. Tommy has an opening in Mesa District at Mesa High, and it was time for me to go. I wanted to try something new outside the box, and now I'm going into my 3rd year at Mesa High.
Coach, there's so many parallels in your story. I just absolutely love it, and I love hearing about those of you who don't know Coach Kiefer. My father played for Coach Kiefer in the 68, 69, and 70, and there's actually a headline in the 71 paper as the preview article is the Chargers now get to find out what it's like to play BC before Crow and Collette. Playing at Texas, was a all-state linebacker at McClintock, and
Randy Collette.
Yes, and I also knew that I wanted to be a football coach my sophomore year when I was working with my uncle Mike Gibbons and Scott Bemis. I sat in with them on a Saturday watching them prepare for a game, and I was like, I want to do this. And it's so cool to hear about. Like I said, Coach Kiefer won over 300 games, a legend. I played for Coach Johnson, who's a good man. I always respected Coach Johnson's work ethic. It was just, there was few that had a work ethic like him. Coach Baniszewski, Coach Hines is a fantastic coach. You've worked with some of the best coaches around. I played with Coach Faust's son at McClintock.
LP?
Yeah. So there's so many cool parallels there that I really enjoy hearing about. And like I said, I was excited to do this episode because our number one goal is to try to help coaches. And one of the things I think coaches, and you hear this from guys all the time, and I can firsthand say that I believe it's true. No matter how much experience you have, you really don't know what you don't know in terms of being a head football coach at a larger program or even a mid-sized program like a 4A school or a 3A or 2A school, because there's a lot that goes into it. So the first question I wanted to ask you is, what do you think a coach, and obviously this can be geared towards whatever in the interview process, but we're gearing it more towards football guys, and what can a coach do in the interview selection process? Because this is an area I'm really thankful that I'm at a school that I plan on retiring at, because my resume would note, not that there's not good stuff on there, but I have I just wrote everything out. And I have been, because I've been at Prescott so long, I've had the opportunity to be on some committees. We've had to hire various coaches, and some of the video presentations in resumes and things like that were, I was like, oh my gosh, I wouldn't get an interview anywhere now because I can't do any of this stuff. But what can a coach do? And obviously some of it's going to be based on resume, your success you've had, but what do you think a coach can do when those things are getting screened and they're deciding who to interview?
I really think, so we're going to the beginning when the job is posted, right?
Yes, sir.
I highly encourage, it doesn't matter if it's a 1A school or a 6A school, is do your homework. Now, some of these schools, when the job opens, Obert's going to tweet it out and everyone will know, hey, that job's open. There's some jobs that open and no one knows they're open. Now, one thing that I always look at, because I went through this at Desert Vista and I've gone through it at Mesa, is what did these guys do to get where they're at now? So let's say the Mesa High job opens up. Let's say it's the Brophy job opens up. Everyone and their mother is going to apply. It could be 50 applicants. Well, what gets you through that screening process? In my eyes, I want to see the path you took to get to where you're at. There's a lot of coaches out there that work their way up at the same school. There's a lot of coaches that left a successful program as an assistant coach to become a head coach at a 2A, 3A school so that they could get that experience for a 6A job, if that's the route they took. But I just, for whatever reason, I really like looking at the pathway they took. The thing that's really hard is because, you and I, we know a lot of people, is when the head job opens up and it's somebody that has 1 year experience, period. But they think they can do it. And I really think you got to look yourself in the mirror and go, am I truly ready for this step? I've had to tell plenty of people I know, you know what, your interview was okay, it was weak in this area, but I encourage you, go be a head coach at a really small school where they would love to have someone with your experience as an assistant to bring it to that level of their play. But there's good football down there, but you've got to be willing to take a risk and leave where you're at to get that experience. So in the screening process, you have your veterans, and veterans don't have it easy either. Their route is, okay, why is this guy applying for this job? Why is he leaving where he's at? And most veterans don't even apply for the job. They'll call you and they'll meet with you to kind of get a vibe of what you're thinking before they put their name out there. Because if they put their name out there, everybody finds out and it hurts where they're at. But I think as a young coach or a person that wants to get through that screening process, they have to tell a really good story up front. And that is, here's the path I've chosen, here's how I've prepared for this moment, and here's how I'm going to make this happen. And when I was at Desert Vista, I think it was my last year, Lincoln Riley had just gotten the USC job. And my football job was open. And he came into my office and we were talking, and I said, hey, I'm getting ready to interview football coaches. I said, what's something you would ask one of your future assistant coaches? Oh, he goes, oh, that's easy. Everybody talks about culture. Everybody, oh, culture, I culture this, culture that. He goes, but I want to look that guy in the eyes and say, talk to me about the culture you would build on this campus with your position group. And he said, David, you can tell if that guy's BSing you and he's not ready. And I said, well, why is that? He goes, anybody that wants to be a head coach or an assistant coach at a high-level program lays in bed every night and they visualize their team in the locker room, at practice, at school, out in life. They picture the phone calls, they picture the conversations about what we're doing and why we're doing it on our campus. And he said, I try to pull that out of them. And if they don't have those answers, he goes, I know they're a fraud and they're not ready. So I really think that it's the preparation. So how do you get that in a screening thing? You send in your app and your resume, but you make a phone call to the athletic director and you say, hey, I submitted for the job. Could be an email because we're busy, but put in there the path you took and why you're ready for this moment.
I love that. I think that's fascinating stuff. And when you were talking there, Coach, it gave me into another question there. Is that weighed differently? You guys just made a hire. Coach Hathcock has one of the best resumes in the state. Fantastic football coach. Always been a guy. When I was the offense coordinator at Dobson in 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, incidentally, the last years we made the playoffs. But anyhow,
oh yeah.
When I was the offensive coordinator at Dobson, Coach Hathcock was at Desert Ridge, and he was even then just so giving with his time. But that leads me into my question. Is you talked about, I remember as a young coach being told when I was in the Mesa district, and at that time I intended on being a head coach in Mesa. And I remember hearing from guys, if you want to be a head coach in Mesa, you have to leave and be a head coach somewhere else to come back. And that was kind of, I think that was the thinking then. But you talked about the path. Does that path matter? Is it obviously being able to illustrate the story and verbalize the story, but is there more weight in a guy that maybe was in a top-notch program and learned from great guys, or a guy that went out and took over a struggling program and maybe learned on the fly? Is there one or other that you consider better? Is it all?
No, I really do, because because sometimes it gets to the point where you're splitting hairs on applicants. And this guy's been a head coach at a 4A school, and they went to the playoffs 3 out of 4 years. This guy's been an assistant coach at a school where they won the last 6 open titles. Okay, I get it, but did he really run the show, or did he, like me? I'm not going to take any credit for what Coach Kiefer did. Zero. I mean, it was all him. You know what I mean? But I took what I learned from him, and I was able to do it somewhere else without him. And that's what I really like, is somebody that had worked as an assistant at a very successful program. Did they take what they learned from there, put in their own stuff, and take it somewhere else and have success? And, talking about Jeremy played for Paul Morrow, who was very successful.
In state titles.
Yeah. So, okay. Paul Morrow, fantastic coach. Jeremy played for him, learned from him. Jeremy goes to Sholo and wins a title. And you know what I'm saying? Then, like you said, he goes to Desert Ridge and just, surprises people left and right. Goes to Verado, and in my eyes, shocked the world over there. To me, he learned from somebody, but he had to go out and do it himself. And he did it. He did it himself. Because there's always that risk. Is this guy part of the last 4 open titles? Was he just a role player, or can he really do this? Because I want to see proof that you can run a show. I've even told a guy, become the head freshman football coach. When I left Desert Vista, their current head coach, head varsity coach, he replaced Scooter. I told him, before I left, you need to be the head freshman football coach. Scooter's the head coach. You be the head freshman. Well, why do I want to do that? I said, because you need to learn how to run a show. Not X's and O's. Attendance, parent communication, booster clubs, grades, all of that, so that when you interview, you can show that you did it. Well, now Scooter left, and this guy's the head football coach. So I think, yes, he stayed in the program, but he became a head coach. And coaching freshman football as the head coach, it's your own little world down there.
Very much so, because as you know, it's difficult for the coaches to, you want to be as involved, and that's something I think I've gotten better at as a head coach over time. Early in my career, I was poor at managing the program from the bottom to the top, and I think we've gotten better at that in time, but I'm entering my 13th year as a head coach, so I've had time to make mistakes and screw things up, which I definitely did. Another thing I was going to ask you, Coach, is I think it's important for guys to share the same vision. Now, Arizona's an open enrollment state, so there's a lot of variables in Arizona because of that. And nobody is out there talking about recruiting or anything like that, but you always want to make your school as attractive as possible. To be honest with you, it's one of the reasons I won't leave Prescott. Most of the time, kids grow up knowing they're going to be Badgers, knowing they're going to be Bears. Very much like you talked about at McClintock back in the day. I like that aspect of it. Mm-hmm. That's probably not the case in the Valley. So my question is, and this is something when Coach Samasa, who was my coaching mentor in 2008, and I won't name the principal, but we were let go at Dobson. And one of the things we were let go over was he had been an assistant principal at Hamilton, and he wanted us to be a Hamilton-like program. And I said, we're a 30-year-old school. Hamilton's been open 4 years. We were trying to be Sunnyside. We wanted to have a really strong wrestling program, and all those kids played football too, and we were tough as nails, and we would make runs in the playoff because we were tough, and we had those type of things. I didn't think we were ever going to be a Hamilton thing, and he disagreed with that. He's the boss, so that at the end of the day is fine, but I think it's important that the AD and the coach share the same vision and maybe understand everywhere can be successful, but there are different levels of success in different places. If you go to Liberty and take over for Coach Thomas if he left and all of a sudden are just in the 6A playoffs, that's probably a different definition. So talk to me a little bit about aligning those visions with Coach and AD.
Well, and that comes down to an interview question. I mean, when the job opens up, I sit down with the principal and we discuss, what do we want? What are we looking for? What do we want to look like as a football program? And like you said, Hamilton, Basha, blah, blah, blah. We don't want to be that. We want to be Mesa High. And we know that Mesa High can be successful in football based on what we are. We are what we are. And we are hard-nosed, tough, blue-collar. So us going out and attracting a coach that runs a spread-style offense with 5-star wide receivers and this and that, we don't have that. So we kind of go backwards where we develop our head coach that we want, and then we root that out in the interviews. And in the interviews, we talk about how can we make Mesa High attractive to even our own neighborhood. What do we want Mesa High to be? And really what comes from that is youth football, feeder programs, junior highs, elementary, getting the little kids wearing purple, and involvement like that. No, we don't want to become those schools that are, I don't even want to get down that road, but we want to be homegrown, but we want to be tough, and we want to do it the right way. And I really think, like you said, a principal says, well, why can't we be like Hamilton? I mean, I don't even know how I would have answered that question, but I really think that with the Open and 6A football, I'm just as happy being a 6A champion than I am the Open champion. I mean, it's the same trophy, it's the same banner, it's the same ring. That these kids 30 years from now will say, hey, I'm a state champ.
I think that's one of the things I've talked about with guys, and I just did an episode with Richard Obert, and we did a 4A preview of every region in 4A. It was really a ton of fun. But one of the things I give the AIA so much credit for, I think they've done a fabulous job in balancing football. And even though there's 29 schools in 6A and there's an Open champion, there's a 6A state champion, I think the way Arizona is with the open enrollment, that's needed. Because I think it's super 6A. This is just my opinion, so I hope I don't upset. Coach McDonald's a friend of mine at Basha. I've never spoken to Coach Thomas, but great respect for what he's built. But if anybody besides Liberty or Basha wins the Open, everybody's going to be surprised. Now in 6A, I have no idea who's going to.
You're exactly right. I mean, let's face it. Mountain View last year made the finals.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, nobody saw that coming.
Absolutely.
So, to me, it's wide open. And that's where, I've never coached. When I was at Perry and we made the title game, there wasn't an Open. It was 6A. I've never, at Desert Vista, we made the state semis, 6A. There was an Open, but we made the 6A semis, and Liberty beat us. That was 2019, I think. And it was 33-30. Fantastic game. But I think that was maybe the year after, Corona went 10-0 and made the Open.
And got rolled.
55-0, and they didn't even cross the 50-yard line. I guarantee if we talk to any of those kids or their coaches that year, they didn't want to make the Open. But they went 10-0. Put them in 6A, they win a title. I mean, Corona could have a state football title. So I really think 6A is where it's at, really. Now, yeah, I'd love to have a team that makes the Open and rolls through everybody, but I really think it's, like you said, if Basha or Liberty's not in that final game, what the heck happened?
Everybody will be shocked.
Yeah.
One of the things you said, and like I said, I'm past that stage, but when I did interview after I'd been a head coach for a while, I think one of the best tips you gave was see if you can get a direct email to the, this is interesting because I joke about this with our current principal now. When I applied here, and I know you know this, those interview things it takes like 2 weeks of your life to finish the interview at certain districts. And I had called Prescott and said, hey, I want to interview for the job. I hadn't finished all that. He had told the committee, well, we shouldn't interview this guy. He hasn't finished all this stuff. And I was like, I wasn't going to spend 6 hours until I knew there was a chance I could get the job. So I think talking to the AD is critically important. Give me some common questions that you're going to ask. You talked about it a little bit, but maybe some questions that a coach should anticipate, because you talked about this a ton. I've only been in one interview personally, and I'll tell you this. I was in an interview, and I knew it was not going well because they asked me, the third question was, you get a parent complaint on a Saturday, this whole big thing about the complaint, blah, blah, blah. How do you react to that? And I said, well, Saturday I'm getting ready for the next opponent and breaking down our film of the next one, so I'm probably not going to respond to it till Monday. And they hated that answer. So I knew things were not going well, but it was also the only interview question I'd ever had from a booster club where he said, it's 3rd and 6, draw me your play against this defense. Only interview I've ever had that happen in, because most of them they're not asking that. They're not talking about that. So what are some questions you can anticipate as a coach in the interview process?
Well, hopefully this is a chance where I can kind of lay out what I look for. I really think it's important that let's go to the day of the interview. Dress to impress. I've interviewed guys for a 6A football job at Desert Vista and Mesa where they've shown up in shorts. Now, people go, oh my God, he's talking about clothing. I'm just talking about, to me, the head football coach at any school is nothing more than an administrator. They are an extension of the admin team. I'm not being sexist or anything, but football drives the school year. When you have a successful football season, it makes the rest of the year that much better. It really does. The band, the cheerleaders, the community, the success, the excited student body. So I start with your appearance. Dress to impress. I've interviewed coaches in full suits, just ties, or professional clothing without a tie. Also, be engaging, right? And what I mean by that is there's football savants out there, but they can't talk. They can't communicate to a committee. Be engaging. Be talkative. Don't be afraid to talk about yourself. But you have to have that meter inside your head that says, hey, Cody, you're talking way too much, man. Knock it off, right? Know when that the question has been answered. Then get into and be prepared. I have coaches bring in binders for everybody on the committee, that doesn't matter. That really doesn't matter. I mean, you can bring in what you want, but really how we dive into it is we create questions on how you can run a program from freshman through varsity. We're not just talking about varsity football. In most schools, football staff, freshman through varsity, could be 15 to 20 guys. So have you ever supervised that many people? How do you evaluate your assistant coaches? How do you develop them? What are you doing on the freshman level to develop your coaches who then develop your players for the future? I've worked with coaches that don't give a crap about the freshman team. They don't care. Well, that's why they aren't successful. I highly encourage that. I want to hear you talk through that. I want to hear you talk about parent communication. Your response to that question doesn't bother me one bit. But you obviously knew you got the email from the parent, which you would probably say, yep, I got that email. And you know what? I'm going to give it 24 hours before I respond. And maybe I'll respond Sunday night and say, look, it's game week. My only free time is Thursday or Wednesday or this and that. But also, maybe you took care of that problem at your parent meeting in the beginning of the year by saying, look, don't email me on a Saturday. If you want to get in front of me, you got to know my schedule. And I'm not being rude, but here's how I operate. I'm an open book. I'm an open door. But you've got to understand I have a job to do. And my number one concern is the health and safety of your athlete. But I don't have time to sit and talk about what I did at 3rd and 5 and your son didn't get the ball. So I want to hear how you talk through parent. I don't need scenarios. I just want to hear what is your plan for parents. What is your booster club plan? What I always tell coaches is have a wish list that you deliver to the booster club and say, here's what I need. I want these items for our football program for us to be successful. It's the booster club's job to make it happen. But I always tell the football coaches, you've got to meet with your booster club all the time because they work for you. You don't work for them. We get into how do you handle academics? How do you handle, just a routine for your kids? If you practice in the mornings, are you going to have a snack or breakfast for them so that when they hit school, they're not half alive? After school, what are you doing with them after school? Meetings could be lifting. I don't want them just going home. Are they going to tutoring? Are you running their grades? Because I run the grades, but I also want the coach to know what's going on. So we get into what's their experience on grades. How do you handle grades? Then I get into, do you have a code of conduct? What do you do if a kid gets in a fight or he steals something? And then the big one is locker room supervision. What's your plan for that? Do the assistant coaches take days and they just set up shop in the locker room? Is what I highly encourage. We almost make it mandatory here, where you just got a coach sitting in a chair. Because any second could derail your season and your career.
Your career in a second.
Yeah.
I don't assign it because at the end of the day, it's going to fall on me. So when I come directly up after practice and I sit my fanny in a chair, it's a great time to talk to kids, to converse with kids. And
that's what I mean. You're just hanging out.
The locker room is awesome. It's one of my favorite places to be. But I'm not going to put that on anybody else because they're not the ones that are going to answer the questions if something happens in that scenario. I am. And the other thing that you mentioned there is I think is critically important. When you hire somebody as the AD, you want to know this person understands coaching and understands the number one priority is the health and safety of these kids. I think what you said there is so important because when I say professional coaches, I don't mean NFL level. I'm talking about that's what you do. And you understand those things you're talking about, locker room supervision. Have you ever organized that big a group of grown men? Because that was a huge adjustment for me. I wasn't super young as a head coach, but I was 31. I had never been in charge of 40, 50-year-old men. Yeah. And that was an adjustment for me because I was always taught, and respect is huge in our program. We talk about our core values of respect, honesty, toughness, effort, discipline, and selfless. But I always wanted to make sure there was respect within everything. But at the end of the day, I was making the decision on most of those things football-wise. And that was something that's new. If you haven't done that, you got to be willing to kind of take those bullets a little bit because they're going to come. They're definitely going to come. So you answered all that stuff fantastically, Coach. I want to talk a little bit about what resources is it appropriate for the coach to ask? Because I will tell you, when I got the job at Prescott, they did not have a football class, and they offered me the job. I was very fortunate. They offered me the job, and at that time I was the offensive coordinator at Red Mountain High School. And I said, we got a really good team coming back. I'm at a very good school. I want to be a head coach here. I love it. Just being here, I know this is the place. But I can't do it without a football class. And we've since been able to add a freshman football class, so we're really building the kids. This is something, my favorite part of the year to coach is when you're not in season and you're getting to work with the kids without the pressure of the game. But the question is, so I'm not blabbering on, is what resources are it appropriate for the coach to ask for? And this might depend on the level as well, but what do you think?
Well, there's nothing wrong with them asking right out of the gate, are there any jobs for my assistants to come with me, or I have some guys that I want to bring with me? And usually it comes down to, we would sit down and discuss, and we would rank these guys as to the importance of having them on campus. Because we didn't even talk about, we don't need names in the interview, but we need to know that you have a coaching staff. Because what happens is you hire a guy that doesn't have any coaches, and then I'm spending all my time finding people because it's hard to find assistant coaches. It really is. So you could start the question with, hey, I've got some guys that I'm bringing with me. Are there any jobs available for them? And it always comes down to what do they teach and this and that. The other thing is, what would be my schedule as a football coach? Because every 6A school that's worth anything, when they're hiring a football coach, they have a job. You're not hiring a coach and then going, well, we don't have a job for you. You're not going to get anybody for that. So you can ask, you can ask, hey, what would be a schedule for me? Well, you would have A-hour football, first hour weightlifting, second hour that, blah, 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 on and on and on. When it comes to money, back in the day, yes, we could discuss money. Now it's so HR driven, but once again, that comes from the phone call with the AD. Hey, I've been teaching 25 years. Do you transfer years over, salary schedule, blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of answered. Then also, don't be afraid to ask the committee or the AD or the principal in the interview, what are you guys looking for? And may I ask, why is this job even open right now? Now it could have been a retirement that everyone knew about, but it could also be, hey, we're looking for a change in our culture when it comes to more community involvement. Kids weren't coming out. Our numbers were low. We need excitement. We need something new. But I always end it with, what questions do you have? There's no question you could ask that would derail the situation.
I think that's really important for football coaches to know and know what they're setting themselves up for, because I think different places have different ceilings. And what I mean by that is what we've talked about a little bit. I think Mesa High with Jeremy Hathcock has a great chance to be a championship contender eventually at the 6A level. At the open level in Arizona, I don't know. I'm not derailing it. I'm just being honest. I don't know if that's something that'll happen. But I think it's important for everybody to be on the same page in that regard. Also, I think when we've talked about this, and you mentioned it, football's place in the school community. I announce for boys basketball and girls basketball. I've been the head coach of wrestling, not because I know anything about wrestling, but because I am a professional coach. I'm not going to do anything that's going to get us on the front page of the paper. I'm going to try to develop kids the right way and do those type of things. But I think it's important for the AD and the head coach to share a vision of football within the school community at its importance of how the kids are within the school community. Because if your football players are all acting a certain way, that's one thing. But the other thing that I think is important is for coaches, and this is just for me, and most coaches can relate to this. When you have 150 kids, you're going to have a lot of kids, and you have a lot of kids in your program doing amazing things. Amazing things. There are going to be situations where you have kids do stupid things when you have big numbers. It's really a matter of a numbers game. How do you handle that? Super important. But talk a little bit about football within the school community.
Well, really, as you said to start this, Mesa High, the traditions is second to none. I mean, the stuff we do on this campus, not just during football season, during the winter and during the spring. And what we wanted and what we feel like we have now is somebody that is open to the community coming back. We've got people that, have been state champion football players, state champion football coaches, and welcoming them back and making them feel like they're being heard and that they're excited to be back and a part of Mesa High football. Because you're right, it is open enrollment. People go wherever they want. But we really want to focus on the traditions of Mesa High and bringing our alumni back so the kids can see, hey, this guy did what I'm doing right now and look at him now. We want the kids to see that. And Mesa High right now is sitting at 697 football victories. So we're 3 away from 700. So that is going to be a big part of our year this year, is reaching back to the past and bringing them and getting them in front of the kids. Carry on is our motto. And so we have the Ishikawa family come out every fall and talk to every athlete about the tradition of carry on and why we do what we do. We clean the Mesa Cemetery every August on a Saturday at 5:30 in the morning, and we end at Zito Ishikawa's grave, and his family is standing there. They teach us about Carry On. They teach us the Carry On song, and then we sing it there at the gravesite. We do that every year, and there's about 400 kids there.
That's so awesome. I was going to say, one of the things that drew me to Prescott's played football since 1910, before Arizona was a state. The tradition of singing that Carry On song after games is one of the coolest traditions in Arizona. I still remember being a kid, and that championship team you were on at McClintock, I believe, late in the year, lost to a Mesa High team right before the playoffs started, which was interesting. And I, of course, remember the early 90s being at some of those Charger Mesa Jackrabbit games where Michael Moreno was the quarterback at Mesa High. And when Coach Hathcock got the job and he had Coach Rattay and Coach McCain and some of the Mesa legends there, I thought it was absolutely, it gave me goosebumps. It was super, super cool.
We had Kelly Moore, Bill McCain, Jim Rattay. We had former players, and a lot of these guys haven't been on our campus since they left. And it was nice having them back. Coach Rattay got up and spoke. Coach McCain talked. Coach Moore talked. It was pretty cool to see that.
So for Kelly Moore, Mesa High in the state championship game in 2009. I remember that because I was still an assistant at Dobson, and we took it on the chin from that Mesa team. That was and that was the type of team that I think Mesa High can be, because they were hard-nosed, tough, played phenomenal defense, had great defensive line play, ran the ball well, and that was a really, really high-level Mesa High football team. But it wasn't in the mode of they're still, as great a team as that was, making the final against Hamilton, there wasn't 15 D1 guys on the team running around the field, and it was a Mesa Jackrabbit football team, which is what I think made it really, really exciting. And so cool. I got to tell you, I have had an absolute blast talking with you, and I know you're going to do great things for the Mesa High program. I hope our coaches out there use some of this. I'm going to be able to talk to a few different ADs and talk about things, and I love hearing different perspectives, because we have heard a little bit of that, and I hope coaches out there use this resource, because I think it'll help you. And I want to say thank you again for joining us, and anything you want to add in closing about the Mesa Jackrabbits and all the exciting things you guys are doing. I'm going to let you have the floor to close us out here.
Yeah, this was a great opportunity. I really appreciate it. This was fun. Stuff we talked about on my end is making the facility, making our kids proud of our facility, making the coaches proud, and making it attractive. And today they started the demo on our football locker room. We're getting a new locker room, new lockers, paint, wraps. I got the stools sitting right here. I want the kids to be excited about where they go to school, how they get ready, uniforms, the field, everything. Brand new weight room. So we want it first class. And there's nothing wrong with a head football coach going into an interview saying those things. I want my kids, my team, to be proud of where they go to school, not just how they handle themselves at school, but how the school looks and what we have. And there's nothing wrong with a coach demanding that. And then also, any of these coaches, they can call me anytime and ask me questions. I'd be happy to help.
Thank you again for joining us, and I look forward to watching the Jackrabbits' progress in 6A this year. I'll be following. I always on Sunday night try to look up some stuff after I got the game plan put to bed and everything's ready to go for our Friday night up in Prescott. I always try to check in on all the other stuff going on, because as you know, growing up, I wanted to be Barry Sollenberger as much as I wanted to be a football coach. But so thank you again for joining us, and look forward to chatting soon again. And we'll see everybody again for another episode of the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show. Thanks a lot.